Good afternoon. So it's not easy after a lunch to sit in a class, right? When I conduct these long workshops running for a few days, this is the toughest part. I find it is after lunch how to engage people. Okay, but now today I got a task to start a session at that time. So let me see if I could make good justice to all of your time. I am Avinash. So I've been mainly involved in different roles across the organizations for last 16 years. In terms of setting up a company, to sales, to marketing, to delivery side, to consulting of product and service companies both. So this is been my overall experience. And since I was doing a lot of consulting in other countries, specifically in Australia, India, US and Europe, then I started on my own around 6 months back, 6 months back now. I spent a lot of time in writing and rest of the time in organizational transformation side of the consulting side. Okay. So this is me in a brief. I mainly focus on these areas of Agile Scrum. I conduct all different kinds of workshops and trainings in this space, and consulting and coaching also in this space. So just want to go back. Can anybody take a guess? You were able to read this red letter? Yeah. So can anybody want to take a guess, like what does it mean to you guys? Build it right, build write it. Don't worry about it. Just throw your, what does it mean?
First of all, is it build, write, it or IT?
Not IT, it's it.
Okay, but it's basically build something in the right way and you'll get a right product.
Okay, anybody else? Throw ideas.
First is build it in a right way, and second is just build it and then correct it.
Okay.
Basically, your product is what your processes are.
Okay, interesting. Huh? We are focusing on the way we are taking.
Build it right is more of the process or the way when you are doing it, actually, the method of doing it. And building right, it is more of the product or the service which we are talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a product.
Yeah, it is a product. It is a product, right? The idea is generally we focus a lot on building it right. We do automation testing, we want to do like very good coding, guidelines, a lot of things, right? But what we should also look at is, are you building the right thing? Okay, are you solving a customer problem? Are you solving a user's issue? Are you giving happiness to your users? Okay, if it really work, then you're not going to really cut the market. Okay, so starting on that note, I'm going to talk today about, see, to be honest with you, I was not sure about the different kinds of audience that I'm going to get. So I was thinking about what should I talk on? Okay, whether I should keep it on basic, should I do it something on the other side of it? But I thought then let's pick me a topic which probably everybody can connect, irrespective of we are coming from an agile background or not. Okay, so that's where I'm starting. So before we start, I would just want to hear how many of people are aware and using Agile on your projects. Show of hands. Okay. So the people who are not, so you are going to start using it, or never aware of Agile, or planning to implement it. What's this one? Not aware of it. Okay. Out of the people who just raised hands, how many of you feel the Agile has changed your life for better after you started implementing? Okay, and rest of the people, do you guys feel that Agile has not really changed your life after you started implementing? Like, for whom it has not worked? Raise your hands after you started. Yeah, interesting. Or like what could you, like, is it like tough to implement, or it has not worked in your current scenario of the project? Okay, you haven't worked on it. Okay. Fine.
Hello. Yeah.
So one of the things which I have faced problem when we started doing agile, I would rather say we follow agilis, not exactly agile, because it's really hard to sell something to the client when needs a price guarantee, or you need to work on a fixed cost project. So when you write a user stories, you put the complexities and all that, and how many man hours. If it goes way, then it's really hard to sell them.
Yeah.
So I would rather say, rather than focusing on agilis, we focus on agilis. So it's a mix up of both of the things, the waterfall and S++.
Okay, fine. So in a sense, we are talking here once again with respect to what we call as whether agile is better. Somebody says yes, it's better. Somebody says it has worked very well for me. Okay, these are all once again something that we need to quantify. Okay, so what happened was in recent survey, it's a group called Standish. It's an IT research company which does a lot of this auditing of different projects and what do they following. But they publish some kind of these reports. Okay, so if you see here, out of their research report, the waterfall success rate was 14%. Agile success rate was 42%. How much? 1, 2, 3 times. Agile projects 3 times successful. Okay. The success criteria was you are doing everything the client has asked for in the product requirements, 1 to 100 everything, plus you are able to do it on time under budgeted cost. That was the criteria when they were doing the survey. So you see the agile was like 3 times. Now interesting aspect to that. You see there is a challenged, big chunk of the pie, challenged. In case of agile projects, okay, anything, even if you start for example, you start a project in 2 sprints, in 2 iterations, you stop it, it is successful. Because, you know why? Because you come to know it's a bad idea. Instead of investing more on it, you're stopping it. You're saving your capital. Okay, that's a successful project in Agile. Because you show to the client, show to your users, hey, you know, this product doesn't click here. It is not what I want. That's success. Okay. So anything, it doesn't mean that it has to meet all the 100% requirement criteria. So that's also part of Agile success. Second, a lot of projects which are done under Agile they were able to complete only 60% of what client wanted. Not everything, not 100%, but the client got all the business value by just doing 60% of the said requirement. Okay, even that qualifies as success. You know, he saved that 40% of time and effort because he got all the business value by just doing only 60% of the project, because the focus is on delivering highest business value. Okay, so if you see it from that, these kind of projects are classified as challenged under waterfall, but interestingly, these are considered as success in Agile. Okay, so if you see it here, around 90%, 91% of the projects done in Agile are successful. Okay, probably we need to redefine the concept of success. It's no more on budget, on time. Okay, it's focused more on the business value the client is going to get. Okay, now if you see 14%, and here we are talking about 90%, nearly 7 to 8 times Agile projects are successful, which is a big number. And being involved in this for quite long, I think it makes sense to find this kind of a figure. Why? Because you have got control on your projects sprint by sprint. Sprint is of like 2 weeks, folks. Either sprint, or you could use the word iterations. Okay, so it's of 2 weeks. So you got control on your projects 2 weeks. You involve customer much early in the game. Okay, you take feedback from him. You give freedom to the people to innovate. So these are the things which has contributed to such a big number, which is around 91%. So, which is a very big waterfall projects of 14%, and here we are talking about 8 times more successful Agile projects. Okay, so now my question to all of you is, how do you sell Agile to your customer? Just how How do you sell Agile to your customer?
I think you tell them about visibility. You talk to them about how projects fail or the end deliverable is not what they want, and you will give them the benefit that they would have feedback, they would have visibility at every stage. So during the project itself, they can be double sure that they are getting what they want, and the company is not focusing on features that they might not want.
Yeah, right. What else? How do you sell? What has been challenge for you in terms of selling Agile to customers? Or what's been successful part of it?
The cost,
Like,
the final cost of getting the first product out and reused.
okay. Okay.
Challenge is to get them to not go for a fixed price every time. Just like Ashish from Technically was sharing, that they engage on a fixed price and then they change to a T&M mode. That really doesn't work. It's not the right engagement up front, in my opinion, and that's.
Okay.
The challenge is essentially for the clients themselves. They say, hey, if you cannot tell me how many sprints or exactly like a deliverable time frame,
Yeah.
and you're going to just tell me that we're going to build things in an incremental manner,
Yeah.
and you're going to tell me that the release 0 is an estimation is worth nothing.
Yeah.
How can I actually go back to my stakeholders and say, hey, listen, we're going to put in this money, we have no idea when it's going to be done.
Exactly.
Client budgeting,
Yes.
right up front when you've just engaged, especially in a non-induction phase, non-paid induction phase.
Yeah, right. And I agree.
Huge challenge.
Yes, selling Agile is not easy unless the client himself is completely aware of the entire benefits. Okay. So one of the things, for example, let me give an aspect on fixed price. We were talking in my CXO meet too. Okay. I go to Bangalore. I land in, I want to move from my whatever, within for whatever work. I'm hesitant to take autos in Bangalore. I know that this is going to rob me of completely. They will take through all convoluted paths. So I bargain for a fixed amount beforehand. I bargain for a fixed amount beforehand when there is no trust. Right? So fixed price will be there. It's not that it's going to go away. Okay. But wherever there is a client who is working for the first time or he doesn't have that level of trust, he would want to go for a fixed price. Don't have an option there. You need to definitely do it. Like I know Srijan is doing very well in terms of induction, educating the client and trying to get their hand. Okay, but this is the thing that wherever there is lack of trust, so a lot of different companies following different models there. They go for an initial fixed bid till the time there is a level of comfort and trust, and then they gradually move into whatever you want to call T&M. And now there's a lot of different flavors even within fixed bid. So coming back, so I was talking about the build it right and the build the right it. Okay, people who missed it, build the right it is the building the right product which is going to solve a use case, multiple use cases within the market. Okay, so because most of the time we are focused on building, are we using the right set of tools, are we using the right project management tool, all of things, but at the end of the day, you're solving a business case. I think that should be our main focus. Okay. So, this question to you guys. What is the biggest risk on projects?
Cost overrun.
Sorry? Sorry?
Scope creep.
Cost overrun.
Expectations. Missed expectations.
I would say mismatched expectations. That we might not get paid the way we wanted. The client might cut money arbitrarily, and the client might not get what he wants because the features might look different from what he expected.
So you must get a project
It's the
failure.
biggest risk on your
No,
organization.
it's not customers.
Biggest, I'm asking, okay? Not-
Customers not accepting the product you're rolling out.
Customer going away.
No, the end customer of the product, of the business who's engaging you, is not, the customer doesn't buy that product that you're building.
Exactly. Building the wrong
Wrong
product.
product. Yeah.
Okay, that's the biggest, guys. Whatever path you take, whatever methodology you follow, you say I'm agile, all these things. But if you're building a wrong product, there is no takers for you. Okay, so the focus is once again how to make sure that we are not building a wrong product. Okay, so once again the customer comes as the center now of the overall engagement. If it's a product company, then you have got a lot of users. probably would say, for example, I was involved in some this domain application, domain registration and open source application hosting product that we were building, which got sold to one of the good companies. So there, I was playing a product owner role. For me, the entire globe was the end users. Anybody who comes and registers, right? So I need to build a product which satisfies their needs, which not GoDaddy is providing or which is not Bluehost is providing. I need to provide that kind of a differentiator for myself. And it solves some of their actual business problems. So I think few will argue on the following 3 points. Value attracts customer. If you've got a really good product with good value, or you have got a service, don't take me wrong, I'm trying to put across both the product and service examples here. Even if you are having a company which is providing an excellent service, it's a service company, it attracts customers. Okay, one is we talked about all SEO and a lot of things, but nothing can beat a word of mouth. And our networking and people recommending, hey guys, I work with these guys are great. Okay. Quality earns respect. Agree?
Yeah.
Innovation differentiates you from the competition. Innovation is that even the kind of service offerings that you provide, being a service company, or it could be a product which is going to have there are a lot of already competitors, but you still have a great differentiator within you. Okay, I'm going to focus on these 3 today. Okay, the innovation, and I'm going to talk about a model to about some of the good companies who are following that model. Truly successful, as I told, have all of these 3: value, quality, and innovation. Okay. The key to success here is unlocking what is called as a customer core. We don't know our customers well. Most of the time, we don't know what customers are actually asking for. Okay. Many times even I used to work, when I used to be a developer, I used to say, yaar, ek client ko kuch nahi pata, usko kya chahiye. But that's a fact of the industry. You can't be blaming on a client, but we are a consultant, we are here to solve that case. Okay. That the client doesn't know. It's always the client has got a lot of abstract thinking. You need the specifics will only come into picture when he engages that's how the consulting companies or service companies or some of these come into picture. Because customer decisions are made at the conscious and the subconscious level. What does it mean? It means we need to understand the customer much better than to what extent they could articulate their requirements as part of requirements document or whatever, or as part of verbal communications. Okay, so more than that, we need to understand them very well. Okay, so to really understand the conscious and the subconscious part of it, okay, this is very, very important to understand, because see, many times you enter into a what you call probably, I used to call it as many times the fusion workshops, which I used to facilitate for clients. What the fusion workshop is, like for example, I remember conducting something for the company called TDC, Texas Department of Crime and Justice. We creating a kind of fusion workshop. The idea was the client was having a high level understanding of what I want to build, but he was never sure about what real specifics will go into the product. Okay. So we were around 6 people who conducted the fusion workshops. The focus of it is, he said, after the workshop you could go to Wipro, or you could get the implementation part, or could be somebody else. But we are here just to identify and define your problem better. Okay, because understanding the domain and the business domain and the business problem is the key. Because then rest of the things will start following. So all these things were running across the world. So in that case, and at that time in 1980s, there was a professor called Kano in Japanese university. He came out with an interesting model to understand the customers. He said, I want to know, like, what do they really want? if not, we'll be probably building something which may not be of help to the customers. Okay, so he defined there are three distinct needs. Three distinct needs of a customer. So I'll go in depth about this modeling and how to go about it. So you see here there is something called threshold or basic or must-haves in your product. There is something called performance or linear. This is an axis which is customer satisfaction axis, okay, and this is an axis which says if the features are completely implemented or features are absent. Okay, so this is are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the customer satisfaction axis, and these are features present or absent axis. Okay, now he defined three kinds of needs: must-haves, threshold or whatever you want to call, something called performance or linear attributes of the requirements, something called exciters and delighters. Okay, let's go one by one. Threshold must be present in a product. If your customer want to use it, it has to be there in your product. If your users has to use that product, these features has to be there. If not, what will happen here, these are must-haves. Okay. After some time, the customer satisfaction will not increase because he says it is expected of the product. I want it part of the product. Improving the amount of features here, because many times what happens in development, we spend lot of time here improvising them, refactoring them, but that's not going to increase your customer satisfaction. The users may not be using it at that time to that extent. So some example, you enter into a hotel room, what do you expect? A bed, a table, right? If you enter into a hotel room and if you don't find these two, what will happen? You will be highly dissatisfied. So what does it mean? These are the must-have threshold. If they are not there, it is going to create a lot of dissatisfaction among the customers. Okay. Product example. This is a service example. Desk, TV. Do you think having 3 desks will increase the satisfaction in a hotel room? Or 2 desks? No. That's a reason. It gets plateau after some time. Having 2 desks will not improve his satisfaction. He needs one bed and probably one desk or whatever it is. Product example. Phone. You want to make and receive calls. You want to send text, SMS. These are must-haves. Will you say that if somebody comes, you know what, you can't make calls, but it's just a smartphone. You can access the internet. You could do a lot of things, everything. Okay. Phone is expected to have at least few features. It's a must-have. Now, this is also called unspoken must-haves. Client will not, many times client may not express this, clearly saying that I want this. He says, yeah, you are building an e-commerce site. It's expected you'll have a shopping cart. Expected you'll have some few payment gateways. Probably I will do with only American Express and Visa and Master. I may not require Discovery. Okay. Discovery card, that's fine. But it's expected that these features will be there. Okay. Now, so that's the reason it's called unspoken must-haves. There's something called linear. These are spoken ones. The client do express this, that he wants this as part of the product. He wants this in the product. What are those? The more the better. The more number of such features, the customer satisfaction increases. More such features in your product. Okay, so it's correlated linearly. And a lot of products, pricing is dependent on this side, this one. I'll give you an example now. 2 days back, I was evaluating one of the Agile project management tool. Okay, it's based out of Montreal. I think it was a startup which 1 year back they started building a tool. So they said that we want you to review the product and XYZ everything. So in a demo in the evening when I was reviewing the product, there were so many features. Okay, I said, you know what this Rally does? Oh, you know what this does in a much better way in probably Atlassian tools or some other way. But what is your differentiator into the market? Okay, how would you sell it? Are you focusing on pricing? Atlassian gives us $1 per user. You're saying $4. What is your differentiator? Okay, so the product price is quite linear related to the amount of features that you build into the product. Okay, now for example, okay, probably a phone, product example, a lighter phone, okay, and a quick start phone. For example, I use this Android, okay. My daughter, she is 7-year-old. She uses, my brother-in-law has got Samsung Galaxy. It's much lighter than this. She plays game in this and she plays that. She says, it's heavy. It's like what, 139, that's 120 grams. She likes that one. Okay, she's 7-year-old. Okay, because that's how it is. Probably the phone manufacturer should look at, nowadays these phones are used heavily by our kids too. When I'm back at home, my kids use a lot of this phone, okay, for playing games or whatever. So it's very, very important in terms of the lighter phone. That's where the customer satisfaction increases. Lighter phone, quick start. It takes, you look at the Windows laptop, it takes like some time to boot. You open up a Mac and switch it on, right? That's the satisfaction. The customer starts liking it. Wow, it takes so quick. So this is how it's gradually related, and this actually defines your product pricing. Okay. Now, and this customer expresses this if you ask right questions. So I'll come to the questioning method in a while. There's something called exciters. Exciters, or it's also called as delighters. Okay. They are the wow part of the product. When they look at that part, client says, wow, this is something unique. Something, what is this? Unspoken. Client has never expressed it, but you have added it into the product. Okay. So when you are building a product company, so you added it. I will give a service example very soon. Okay. So unspoken excitement. So I love this element of the product. This is the line that he sees when he looks at this feature. Lack of exciters, keep in mind guys, lack of exciters will not decrease the satisfaction. Okay, but having exciters will increase the satisfaction. Because why exciters will not decrease the satisfaction? Because client doesn't know that such a feature exists. So there is no way that you can dissatisfy him. But providing that, exponential growth in his happiness. Okay, so this is also called unknown needs. These kind of products which has got these delighters, okay, command premium pricing. The pricing I said the linear, the earlier one too. Here it also demands a product pricing. Now this demands the premium pricing when a product of this kind is there. Example. I will give you different kinds of examples. The same tool example, you compare this with Rally. It's an amazing agile project management tool. Okay, ultimate, but they ask for premium pricing, really premium product that there. Because there is nobody in the competition who was so good, who are near to them. Okay, they have got amazing research and a lot of things that they have done. And when the users start using that product, they start recommending that product. That's the actual sign that your product is really good. It has got those wow features. Because when they will start recommending that product to their friends, colleagues, in their network. Okay. And some companies call it as a USP, unique selling point, or unique value proposition. Okay. Around, you can say in 1.5 years back, I was with one of the companies here, service companies. So I was given a task of marketing and sales. I'm doing Agile and I was doing marketing and sales too there. So they asked me, when I took over that part, the first thing I asked, what is the differentiator for this company among the shop next to it. In the same building, there are probably another 20 companies who are all doing the same stuff. What is the differentiator? Then the entire sales marketing team, they said, hey, faster time to market. Somebody said, reduce cost of development. I said, you go to website, you visit 100 websites, everybody talks about the same thing. Don't you think so? Everybody nowadays, it's a cliche. Everybody says faster time to market, very cliche terms. Everybody says reduce cost of development. Okay, it's not a differentiator anymore. You need to identify those differentiators. Being a service company, what is the differentiator? Nowadays, client says, even the next 2 years also told me half an hour before the same thing. Okay, but how are you different than other than that? So, if you take an example, if you enter into a room and you find a free Wi-Fi, I put in free Wi-Fi today. You know what? Whenever you get into these cities, I end up paying a lot just for Wi-Fi in the hotel room. They charge hefty money, okay? And every time it seems like, then around 4 months back, I was in Chennai in one of the hotels, they provided free Wi-Fi. Ooh, wow. I said, this is wow. Because I'm not used to it. Okay? Hear me right. I'm not used to it. Okay? Now, what happens? I'm getting used to it. It's no more an exciter to me. Okay? This is the important part of this model. So another is, probably on a phone, I'm able to attract to product design, or able to personalize my phone better, or some of my wow effects. Probably 1 year back, touch phone could have excited me. Right? Even my daughter now is not excited about touch phone. It was a year back exciter. So this is what happens. With time, your exciters start becoming performance linear, start becoming must-haves. This is the fact. But in service, we are still talking about, for last 10 years, we are talking about faster time to market, reduced cost of development. Right? So it's time for us to think, does it is a differentiator anymore? And this is a trend, this is how it will work. I'll give you a couple of other examples I faced in terms of the wow, the exciting features. Flipkart came into India, right? Now, to do it just before Diwali, my daughter, she wanted a camera, so ordered. But she was like, but will it get delivered post Diwali? Like it was just 3 days before. We made the decision. Okay. She was like quite this one regarding whether it will be whether it will get delivered so late. Okay. I ordered probably in the evening, and next day evening it was delivered at my doorstep. You see the happiness in my family, with my kid? That's wow. In a country, in India, where the delivery system is not so perfect, beyond, like it's far away from perfect, and Flipkart is able to deliver something I just ordered and next day it lands at my home. That's the wow effect. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Probably if this gets ironed out in next 2 years, because I was in one of the retail congress summit last year. Everybody were talking about shipping. There are a lot of logistics company. Everybody were talking about how best we could actually deliver to our customer. Nowadays we can't trust Blue Dart, we can't trust FedEx, I don't know what all company names they were taking. That's one of the key things. And during this era, Flipkart is doing something of this kind. Okay, example another. I was planning a trip to South Africa, just a travel driving trip. So embassy asked me, can you give me the entire itinerary? Day by day, where are you staying, coordinates exactly, where are this one. I said, oh man, I need to provide every small detail. Nowadays people find it tough, or I find it really tough, and you type everything, sit down and type everything. I went to booking.com, I booked hotels and whatever, flights. All the mails that I came, I sent it to TripIt. The TripIt passed all my emails, created a itinerary. Wow, it saves so much of time of mine. That's the wow exciter for me. right? It saved so much. You guys have used TripIt, right? It's so wonderful. It passes your email. I get something. I just send it to the TripIt ID. It automatically gives me all the things. Okay, that's the what I'm talking about is the exciter or the wow effect. You guys might have experienced some more with respect to in different this one. With respect to service companies, I think what I know is what, for example, I think I remember Rahul talking to me on that, like involving customers, induction process, getting to educate them on Agile. Those are, you are trying to create a differentiator. If not, everybody next to you is doing the same things. Everybody is talking same thing on their website. There's nothing much I can differentiate looking at my website, right? So it's okay. This is what we call as 3 distinct needs. But how to identify them? When I look at, I'm building a product. How will I identify? Is it threshold, or is it a performance, or is it a delighter for me? It's a challenge to understand customers, because we told these are subconscious. The customers don't express this explicitly. So what is important then? How do we get this information? How can we get this? How can we get this information?
Imagine yourself in the shoes of the customer.
Okay.
By talking to the client more often.
Okay. Sorry?
Communication.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
And getting
Because you
feedback.
are in a product specification, conceptual time, right? What would you do? You'll ask like different questions, different. Yeah.
You want what you know that you adapt, respecting that.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the how we differently. Some people argue with the concept called inspect and adapt. They say apply, inspect and adapt, because inspect and adapt is a lot theoretical focus. You apply it, as you said, take it to the market, inspect and adapt on that part. Okay. So, but what is really important is, once again, is asking right questions. Okay. I talked about 3 things, right? Quality. What are those? Value, quality, innovation. Somewhere it feels like Agile. Is it? These are the 3 things Agile talks about in all throughout its everywhere. I'm not talking Agile today. This is the state of the market. Okay? But if you see, business value is the main topic during Agile discussions. How to provide business value. Quality, lot of extreme programming engineering practices focused on quality. Right? Agile teams are self-organized. They make their own decisions, and you don't penalize for their mistakes. Building a team is not easy, but it can be built. There are a lot of companies who are doing it. So innovation, that leads to innovation and giving freedom for people to think. So these are all addressed in different frameworks within Agile. Okay. Now, the biggest challenge is how to really get this information out of the customer who is not expressing it so well at the subconscious level. One more example here. For example, a brakes is a must-have. Stopping distance can be one-dimensional, right? If it stops within probably a meter distance, or if it's a 2-meter distance it takes, so satisfaction increases, right? And if you have got an anti-locking also, oh, delighted. Probably no more. It's getting now. Every car will be having this, right? So this is what happens in the market, right? Any product you take, you need to be on the innovation side always, so that you will differentiate yourself with the rest of the crowd. Okay. So now in the Kano model, there are 2 ways you really question the things. Okay. The very, very important is the curious mindset of the people. Okay. There was a discussion last 2 days back on one of the LinkedIn groups. All the Agile coaches across we were discussing, like, does Agile organization require smart people? Okay, that was everybody said, you know what, they were like Ron Jeffries, who was the founder of Extreme Programming, Jeff Sutherland, Scrum, founder, we are all discussing these things. Yes, Agile requires, Ken Schwaber also pitched in saying that, a lot of discussion coming in, okay. But what the outcome of the discussion is, Agile requires curious people. People who are curious to explore, curious to know more, curious to ask more questions, to understand better. You may not be the best in the breed, okay, but if you are curious, okay, now are you able to connect this to, where does our curiosity comes from? Are we more curious when we are kids than now? Right? Many, even you go to like a lot of, ask a lot of gurus and everybody, they say you should be as curious as your kid, but you're not. Right? Because that's a different problem. School skills or creativity. You could look at YouTube Ken Robinson video. Anybody have seen it? School skills creativity? Ken Robinson? Highest YouTube, TED talk, not YouTube, TED discussion. Right? So curiousness is very, very important. Okay? So when you are curious, you ask questions. You ask why? Everything you ask questions when you are curious. So Kano actually talked about two forms of questioning mode. Okay? It's called functional form and dysfunctional. It means if a feature is present, if the feature is absent. You know what I'm saying? If the phone has SMS text capability, how do you feel? Your users may say, I expect it to be that way. I expect it to be that way. So, if the phone does not have SMS capability, how do you feel? I dislike it that way. It's very strong emotion. I dislike that product if it doesn't give me the SMS text. This is called functional and dysfunctional form of questioning. Okay. Another example. If your hotel room has a free Wi-Fi, how do you feel? I like it that way. If you see in the current context, I like it. Probably 1 year down the line, I say, expect it to be there. I want it everywhere. Okay. But if your hotel room does not have free Wi-Fi, it does not have free Wi-Fi experience because I don't have that expectation currently. Okay. Just these are like two examples. You could map it to all different your product features. So these are the two questioning mode. And when you actually ask these questions in this way, then you try to map into this kind of a matrix. Okay. If something under functional came as like and something as expected, it means it's an exciter. It's an exciter. If something, you could use this table to identify what are those mandatory features, what are those exciters, and what are those must-haves for your product. Okay. Then you do is you ask all 100 features to the end users, you do the survey, get the information, and you then try to map which has got the maximum responses. Then you say, okay, you know what, online store on whatever has got 21 responses and excited, this is an exciter. Compared to these two. This is an exciter for the customers would love it if you have this on this product. And these are becoming our linear and whatever, the must-have features. This is how you actually ask questions from here and ask these kind of questions for different features of your product and get the user response and then try to map using this data collection. And you come out with a really exact numbers and then you define, okay, this is what I want my users, these users. Because nowadays we were also discussing, right, it's not about being an implementation partner. It's about being a business partner, collaborative partnership. Because clients would love you when you are actually going above being just an engineering team for a client. You associate themselves at the business level. You work with them at that level. That's where the differentiators come. Not many people do it. Just they say, oh, you know what, then you are considered as a vendor. Then you act as a vendor rather. Right? So it's very important in the customer collaboration to understand and really work with them. I'm pretty sure it's not far off when, for example, let's assume you start focusing on a vertical, a domain, and you will start having a domain expert in your company. You say this is our differentiator. You know what? We do for retail domain, we have got a retail domain expert in our place. You approach your client, say, you know what? He knows your business like you do. Differentiator probably. You need to think. There could be a lot of service examples, a lot of product examples. So, we are able to get to actual what client or users want by asking right questions, right? Even when you're building a good product. The same thing applies even for doing what is not working within our company or within our organization, or what needs to improve on. Okay. So I'm going to talk about, I actually see customer as one important aspect of understanding the product better and understanding what they want. And second is our ability to find root cause to anything. If you know what the client is not giving, is not working very well, you know what, he doesn't have time, or our team is failing frequently. Many times you work on the manifestation of a problem rather than finding out the root cause. Okay, so I'm going to discuss about the concept called 5 whys. Have anybody has used the concept 5 whys or heard about it? Okay, yeah. So 5 why concept. This could be used for at any level for finding out a business domain, business context, to on finding out the smallest problem on your team. Okay, so idea is if you ask why multiple times, you really find a solution, the root cause of that particular problem. Okay, so this could be I will take like around 3-4 examples, so it makes it much easier, and how different teams can use this concept. Okay, so this is a very simple. You find a problem, you ask why. The team says, you know, this is because of that. Then you ask why. You get to the root cause of that problem. Okay, so now let me define a problem statement. Are you able to see this problem statement? Team failed in their sprint is iteration, as they were not able to complete all the work committed. Is it quite common? Yes. It's very common. That's the reason it's here today. Okay. Everywhere you go, what is the next step team do when they find this problem? Or what does the management do when they find this? What do they do?
We get to the problem by asking questions.
That's the ideal, right? But what I have seen personally is you start blaming the team. You start blaming the team. Hey, you know what, this team, they're not good. They're failing. Every iteration, they're not able to deliver what they committed. This is a typical mindset. This is not something I'm not blaming, but you will see it quite often, this kind of a mindset. Because you don't really get into identify why they are failing. Identify that rather than immediately get into a conclusive mode that they are failing. Okay, if you could have asked, let's see, I'm taking an example now. Let's see how team A, some team A, whatever name you want to give, let's see how they solve this problem. Okay? Why did sprint fail? They asked. Probably let's assume if I was there, or Scrum Master, or whoever the person is saying, he wants to do a root cause analysis. Okay, so he asked this question to the team. Why did sprint fail? The team responds, you know what, requirements were not clear. Each team member had a different view of the requirement when they got to the implementation. We did the whatever planning and XYZ, all this stuff. We got an implementation. Each team member thought a different way what this requirement is. Okay. Then, why did team have different views? Next question, why the team had different views? Team were not able to clarify the requirements with the product owner. Product owner is like, you could say, anybody who gives the requirements on a very, very low basic level. I'm trying to explain, okay? People who are not from agile background. Product manager you could take, although there's a difference. Who provides requirements. So, team were not able to clarify the requirements with the product owner or product manager. Team says. Next question. Why this was possible? Why they were not able to clarify with the product manager or the owner? Because the product owner was not available. He's not available. He's not so easily available to the team. When team has got questions, he's not there. Okay, he's like elusive guy. He's like hiding somewhere. He's not near the team too. Why product owner is not accessible? Because product owner is too busy with multiple responsibilities, multiple teams. Hence he is running very low on bandwidth. This could be one of the reasons, okay? Every problem has got multiple root causes you could do. It's also called fishbone diagram. You could do a lot of things. Okay, so you see one of the causes of this one is product busy with multiple teams and he's not. So team is failing, but what's the main reason? Will you blame the team? No, it's a lack of product ownership on the team or a person who can guide the team and from the requirement standpoint or who could clarify the team on the requirements. If team has got a question now, I want a product owner to be able to answer those questions now. Not wait for 25 couple of days or 24 hours. How could we achieve it? So this is the main problem. So in this case, solution is the first is to balance the product owner load. If he's having too many responsibilities, let's assume he's a product owner, he's also CEO of the company. Okay, or he's a product owner and he does a lot of other activities. He is also a project manager, let's assume. He does a lot of other stuff in the company. How will he have bandwidth? Okay, so either if budget alerts, go for a dedicated or somebody in the team can step up. There could be multiple solutions. This slide was able to hold only this much, so I wrote so many solutions, 3, 4. Okay, so somebody within the team can step up or responsibility, there could be multiple, but this is the root cause. So don't undermine a team just because they are failing. Identify the root cause. That's curious, being curious to know what it is. Now let's look at how another team does it. I gave it to this question to another team B. Okay, they are also curious folks. They are also like all curious folks. They started resolving this. Let's see, how did they do? Why did sprint fail? Because the team did not have enough time to test every feature developed. You know what, in Scrum when we are following, we want every feature to be done, 100% done. Not like, अच्छा ये part चलेगा इसमें और ये वाला नहीं चलेगा इसके लिए और testing करना. No, it's either done or not done, right? So because the team did not have enough time to test every feature developed. So why did the team have less time to test? Because team delivered most of the stories. Stories are features. Okay, most of the stories in last 2 days. Is it common? Yes? Most of the stories in last 2 days, the team says. Okay. Why this was possible? Why they actually delivered in last 2 days? Because each team member was working on a different story, different feature. They were, let's assume in a sprint we were doing, let's say 3 developer team, 3 features, all were working on 3 different features. Okay. Why each member was on a different story? My next question would be, why he was on a different feature, story? Because because the team thought it is the best way to approach to finish all of them. Because if all the 3 people can work on 3 stories, we could finish all of them. That was the team thinking. Okay. Why team thought this is the best approach? Because each story was big enough to keep the developer busy for full sprint. Right? Am I true? Is it common? Right? This is what thinking goes a lot of most of the cases. Because each story was big. I want this developer to be independent, let him finish it. So what happened because of which? He delivered, all of them delivered, if it is ending on Friday, all of them delivered on Thursday. So what will tester do? Cut the corners? If you still want to make it done, so you will cut the corners of quality and then you will take all of kinds and this will start paying off after some time. These kind of quality cuts. Okay, so each story was big enough. The solution in this case the problem they are facing, see, it's a team B. If you did this, you can do for like 50 different teams will come up with different problems. It's a contextual. Nothing is universal. Okay, everything is highly contextual information. The key here is team ability to break big ones to smaller ones, big stories to smaller ones. Okay, I will not talk about how to break because itself is a big session for splitting a user story concepts and all those things. And multiple team members could have worked on one story and finished it earlier. This could have been the other approach. Why did they start working in parallelly? We're used to this, what you call, because I'm also coming from a lot of waterfall, Microsoft project kind of background. Okay, I'm used to creating those Gantt charts. No more. Like resource utilization is a focus of the Gantt chart, right? Nowadays when a lot of, oh, you know what, our people are 100% utilized. The focus is on utilization. They say, do you want your laptop to be 100% on CPU? What will happen? It will break someday, very soon. Why do you have to load people with utilization aspect? Don't focus on utilization of people. Because when you start focusing on utilization, you go away from the concept of innovation, business value, a lot of these things. Okay. Examples are like, for example, even Atlassian. I'll take an example. They started doing a concept called Free Thursdays. You might have read, I don't know, around 4 years back. When they started Jira, they have got a couple of interesting tools. Now they have like thousands of plugins. Okay. They started doing a concept called Free Thursdays. What was it? On that Thursday, okay, I think they started once a month, yeah. On that Thursday, nobody will work on anything. People will define what do they want to work on that day, their own ideas, their own thinking, something that came in. Okay? And after they started practicing this, Atlassian has been growing at a big pace. Because they say most of the tools that you find on now Atlassian library came through that Free Thursdays. It didn't came through because of the product strategy of the product owner or a CEO. It came from the people who are working the new things, the innovation side. Or you take the Google concept, Google AdWords, right? Was it part of the Google's main strategy? No. It came out of the 80-20 principles they follow. The 20% of the time they give to the employee, that idea came through that. And later it entered into the mainstream of product development. Now 70% of Google revenue comes through AdWords. That's the freedom, the innovation. When you provide those, when you start focusing less on utilization, things will start. You will start finding your own differentiator. You will start innovating it. Now, so this was another. Finding a root cause is very important when you're running an organization. You apply this to even running a finance or you're running a marketing, because even nowadays I conduct for marketing and sales team, how can they be agile? Everybody now, HR team, how can they be agile? Now, a lot of companies have their sales, marketing, everybody like really focused on this aspect, the business value, focusing on these side of the things. So now, but you know what, many times we get hired, we feel that we are here to solve a problem, right? We get hired because, oh, you know what, I'm here to solve a problem. Because we are hired for that. But many times you are getting hired to find what is working within a company. It's not like company has got only problems, right? A lot of things are working well in a company too. So can we think in a positive side? This is more of a looking at from what is not working side, right? Because this is a very good tool to use in retrospectives. So there's a Scrum meeting called retrospective where you could use this technique. But problem with us is we always try to solve a problem because we think we are hired to solve a problem. So let me turn around this example. Okay? Can I turn around this example and see the positive side of it? It's called positive root cause analysis. Can we apply, asking the same 5 times, can we apply this? Why our last few sprints have gone so well? Why we are doing so well? Last few sprints. because we are able to deliver everything tested with high quality within our 2 weeks sprint. Is it common to make sure that you have successful sprints continuously? Do you guys experience the taste of success of sprints continuously? You do? Yeah. Okay. Why we are able to test everything within a sprint? The team says because we invested in test automation from the start of the project. Also, our testing team started testing quite early in the sprint. Okay, so test automation, and the team started testing quite early in the sprint. Good. Why this was possible? Because our developers delivered stories in frequent intervals as they limited the work in progress. In the sense, work in progress in the sense it's considered to be a highly inefficient way of working, right? We got 3 stories, 3 developers, all the 3 are working on each individual story. That's not a good way of really working together. So they limited the work in progress at instant of time. Also, our stories were small enough so that they could be completed in 1 or 2 days. The team got better. Okay. So then you don't need to really, you are able to put the things in smaller pieces. Then they are able to finish it much faster. So what do you see here? Here you see a new set of good practices that are emerging by using the 5i technique. It's not only there to solve a problem, it's also there to find what is working within a company. Okay, you see here good practices like test automation, limiting work in progress, sprinting stories into small. These are the good practices. For me, as a transformation, I see this as take it from one team and start then putting it across the other organization of the company, other teams of the company. Seeing that what is working in this team, let's re-establish them in the other part of the teams. Okay, so use this to find what is working too. And retrospectives, guys, is not just to solve a problem. So that's the reason I say it's not a problem-solving meeting. Okay, you may find in somewhere you may reference in that way, but it's not a problem-solving meeting. And you know, good things go viral, right? Good things always go viral. Any good product goes viral. Gangnam Style went viral. Collabory D went viral. I don't know whether it's good or bad, I will not argue on that. But went viral. People liking it is important, right? It goes viral. Then this is one of the key things. Positive root cause analysis helps in the overall changing the organization culture and transformation. Okay. Now, So I want to talk about a few things on the stats. So we talked about with respect to Kano model of asking questions, questionnaire, and we also talked about using the right root cause analysis techniques like 5 Is to identify root causes in an organization. And we'll look at, I want to leave with a couple of important information here for you guys to digest later on. You see here, there are like hell of under Agile umbrella, you'll see a lot of things, but around 52, which is around 66% of people are using Scrum and Extreme Programming. Okay, and this was 2011, and interestingly 2012 survey I came to know only a week back, and it was Scrum 81%. Of companies are using Scrum, 81%. It's successful. You know, so many companies, it's not something, you know what, oh, these are all tough to implement. It's not like that. For example, companies like Facebook, they're able to achieve a level of continuous delivery. Okay, there's a different aspects of all these things. There's something called continuous integration, continuous deployment, and continuous delivery level. They deploy like 10 times in a day to the production. That's the level they've achieved. Can you achieve it in the first day? No. You have to take a baby steps towards it. So this is one of the interesting things, like in terms of there is huge adoption of Scrum and Extreme Programming that's coming out. And people, the reasons for adopting Agile is, you see it here, time to market, yes, it helps a lot in actually moving to the market faster. going agile, because you breaking up into small things and you go frequently to market, able to manage the change very well. Okay, the reason you know what do you know like why companies like the big old companies, right? Infosys, TCS, Wipro, where do they make money from? Where do they make money from? Do they make money out of fixed price contracts? Their margins are driven by change scope they get. All these top tier companies. Because they know the money is not in the initial deal that you sign. It may be a $5 million, but the project ends up with $10 to $15 million. Because every scope change asks for the client to pay money. It's like screwing the client, right? Scope change, pay for money. Scope change, pay. Okay, so that's the reason why Agile is making it as a business collaboration. No more like a contract, you know what, a contract vendor kind of thinking. Okay, so a lot of things. There are like a lot of advantages that you find when you start practicing it at the right level. It's very tough, guys. It's very easier said than done, but it's very tough to really have it implemented to the core. You need a lot of time. I was involved in one of the in consulting in one of the companies. 3 months back, I went to that company for one of the Hadoop engagements. When I walked into the company, it's a big telecom company. Walked into the company, I was surprised to see, we and my colleague, we did around 2.5 years back, consulting and whatever, all this stuff. I was surprised to see the company has transformed itself. There is no like a product department concept. Nothing like a business department. All are sitting together. Everything is up and visible. HR is agile. Performance management system has changed. No more that individual rewards kind of concepts. Huge, and it's a big company. It's there in Gurgaon too. Okay, so you will see that it's these kind of transformation, but it took them, when I was talking to their senior head, he was saying it took them 3 years for the transformation. If the company is small, if it's a smaller size company, then the transformation is much faster because just the scale makes a big difference for anything that you adopt. So benefits, once again, I think people, these are the actual stats done across thousands and thousands of different people across 91 countries. Okay, so you see like there are different kinds of productivity improvement, team morale, there are a lot of things that you would see across the companies. I want to end on this one. This is an agile company or enterprise agile is about balancing between people, process and tools. Okay, people about providing freedom. I gave you a lot of examples today on what are those people side of the things. Using right set of process like Scrum or extreme programming kind of practices. Okay, giving them the right set of tools, not just engineering tools. It's also about collaboration tools. It's also providing right platform. It's also providing an open working space. Everything. Okay, so all these three, when you start balancing, that's actually starts helping you create what you call an enterprise agile team. Okay, so there are a lot of ways people go for adoption, transformation I would rather say, and it depends all upon the kind of, but these are the three. If you have only good people, excellent people and process, but you don't give them tools, then it becomes very inefficient team. But you could read this one. It just I've done a chart, intersection charts. If you have people and very good tool, but if you don't have a process, then it's not it's a disengaged team, right? Scrum is an engaging framework. Okay, so I want to could just read about this one. So the Dilbert comics. able to read it? Is it common? Right? That's the reason when you're going agile, it's not a process. When you start thinking something as a process, then you could not make much advance on that part. It's a cultural change, the kind of way that we're working with each other, way we are engaging with our customers. Okay, apply the concept like thinking like Kano model, what we just discussed, how to engage the customers, how to create those differentiators using those kind of model, how in the service companies or in the product companies. Okay, so it changes a lot of things, and it's also not like we are like, it's not like a resource kind of company. You know what I'm saying? Oh, we have got like 50 resources, 100 resources company. It's not that. Agile company is like people. We have got like 100 smart people with this, or 100 curious. Rather, I would want to use word curious. Now on, 100 curious folks in our company. Okay, so that's the change that we are asking for within a company, and it's not easy. It redefines your hiring, it redefines your HR, it redefines your working atmosphere, working scale, your office infrastructure. A lot of these things get changed. Okay, so that was what I wanted to talk today. I'm open to take few questions, and before that, okay, so you could read what I shared today. Yeah, what I shared today is all should be there. Yeah, it's there on my blog too in different articles, but I summed it up today with in one presentation, but you will find it in different articles. And you could write to me, or you could always be connected on my Facebook. People ask a lot of questions. I try to answer there too on that form or on LinkedIn groups. Okay, so you could add me on that part. And so interestingly, I and Rahul, we discussed a few days back, probably a month back, in terms of working together and trying to spread more and more agile across as much as possible that we could do as individuals. So we're conducting some kind of an extensive workshop in Srijan, okay, on some Jan 18, 19, and I'm also conducting something similar in Hyderabad, and gradually expanding into other locations, working with different corporates across India. So idea is to get, and just to be, I'm not a certification guy, okay? So I don't personally believe in too much of certifications concept, because what happens is, certifications are like, you attend 2 days, you get certificate. You can't, that's different thinking. But I don't provide any of these, okay? Because I personally don't believe in it. Okay, so these workshops are definitely very extensive workshops, goes over a lot of discussions. Typically I try to do it for over 2 days so that people get to understand the actual depth rather than at the superficial level of the things. Okay, so yeah, on that note, I want to take any kind of questions from the today's session, or it could be anything from your organization, whatever it is.
This approach so far, I would love to. The problem is that most of our customers would not like to modify their fixed cost engagement with us. So how do you suggest having an agile process in a fixed cost project?
I think, Rahul, you guys have done with Agile on fixed bid, right?
Okay, so I'll share some experiences.
Yeah.
About a year, we've been a fixed cost company forever. Okay, we were bleeding badly. Our bottom line was horrible. We never had a problem. Closing and winning projects. Okay, but we've not made profit for like 3 years now. And people were suffering. We were pulling people out from one project to pushing them into the other. The tail of the project extended endlessly. Okay, you just went on and on with things, and you didn't know whether the project was ending or it was going on. You never reach this sign off of a client. It never happens. I have not seen it happen. Okay, you signed off, the project is done, now you move into maintenance. I have not seen that happening. About a year ago, we started a year and a half back. I think you first conducted a training at our office. Avinash conducted the training, and then I had a chance to go to Agile conference in India, speak there. I spoke to a lot more coaches. So I'm sharing this story for a reason. Somewhere about a year ago, I decided that enough is enough. If something has to change, then we've just got to stop this nonsense of fixed cost bids. And it's not that we have completely stopped it, but 90% out, if I'm not wrong. Shashank, would you agree with that? 90% of all fixed costs. Almost nothing right now is fixed cost. I mean, if there is anything, 10%. How we made the transition was very difficult. Those 3-4 months of saying no to clients, I'm sorry, I will not be able to do this. That Dilbert cartoon, exactly taking a stand there. That sorry, no matter how much I give you, we've done consulting with you for 3 days, which is free. Beyond this, we cannot engage with you on an ongoing basis. To gather your requirement, we need 2 people who will spend 1 week and let's do an induction phase. It cannot be a non-paid exercise. Honestly, I let go of 2 very large projects. One for a very large marketing company in Asia based out of Singapore. I had to let that product go off. It must have been at least a 20 lakh contract, not less. But they wanted a fixed cost of it. I just could not get into that mess again. So, fortunately, we actually had a few clients who said that, look, we love your integrity and we'll stick by you and we'll start working with you. So that sort of turned the whole cycle around. That first 3-4 months was very tough. I had to work with people, changing. I know Avinash always says create champion teams within small teams and make them succeed. But in our 30 people, we just sort of had to change simultaneously, right, wrong, but we were going through that. And fortunately, we found clients who actually, one had a very large organization, was totally agile, and we found some traction with them immediately. And all our products, we moved them to agile. They loved our integrity that we were willing to let go, but not take the project on. So we've turned 10-12 lakh projects into 25 lakh projects, simply because the clients also saw it that there's no way there was an inherent trust. Sorry.
Your clients are based out of US or
Ireland, Europe.
Europe. Okay. You still, when you're working with, for example, Europeans probably or US, you still have an advantage. You could still talk to them, saying that there is an actual advantage in going through. You need to actually definitely educate them, and you need to showcase that value. Okay. Still, when I said in a earlier part of the presentation, you go for a fixed price when there is a lack of trust. It's inherent. I will bargain as I gave. I bargain with an auto wala beforehand rather than sitting and he taking me through entire Bangalore. Okay, it's the same thing. Feeling with a customer, I am giving him money. I don't know whether he will really give it to me or not, right? But you could definitely, if you want to go, you could go for a transition through a fixed rate. But you need to educate the client that there is a value why we should go for this, why you should go for an agile scrum. Okay, and within fixed bid also now there is a lot of variations with how you could do. Fixed bid doesn't mean should be fixed scope. Okay, fixed price, variable scope. Yeah. Okay, fixed price, variable scope. So let client define what he wants within that. How to put that kind of an engagement is also interesting. So, and there are a lot of other interesting models also suggested by, this is mainly Jeff, who is the founder of, he suggests some other, which has implemented in a lot of other organizations. So, but when you go to agile contracting models, there are different models where you could still transition in a slower pace, okay, into the T&M, but definitely educating the client, engaging them, showing the value, okay. If you get a chance, if you have a champion within your company who could really show to the client the value or discuss, or if they got questions, ask them, let them ask questions, 100 questions, clarify it, okay. But bring that kind of a champion within the company who can actually convince the client there's a value in it. If not, go for a small fixed price, then gradually move towards T&M and show that why there is a value in it, going towards it. And every client nowadays, every place sees a value in actually going towards following this kind of method.
Okay, thanks Avinash.
Yeah.
Avinash, we are facing a problem with measurements. We have not reached any reasonable state of being able to measure our okay, sorry, we're not being able to measure our projects right now, the progress, or we're not working with burn down charts and things like that, and that is a huge challenge for us at the moment. Because why? Because we want to tie our performance measurements with projects. So instead of doing one-on-one individual, so manager sits down, you've done this and you've done this not right, that nonsense is not happening at Srijan, and we want peer-based reviews, and in that a measure of success on projects, which could be various, it could be profitability, timely delivery, happiness of client, and so on and so forth. That needs to be tied with even performance bonuses or just measurements, of how a team has done. And we are nowhere near measuring our projects. Either the tools are missing or some challenge. Rajneesh, would you like to maybe?
See, in terms of measurements, you talked about two different things here. One is the people side performance management kind of thing. Second, measuring people.
Yeah.
Okay. Second is measuring project. How project is doing. There are definitely. I suggest only 5 different metrics because when you should be very careful about using metrics concept, using different kinds of metrics, because then suddenly what happens, the management starts getting into micromanagement mode. If you use a wrong metrics, then you know what, I want individual productivity. Shit, man, individual productivity, get into. You know what the team A is doing with so much, team C is not doing to that extent. You start comparing between the teams. There are a lot of things which is not a healthy sign to really get an agile company. Okay, so project measurements, there are like around, I take care of definitely things like burn down chart, and there is something called interesting release bar charts, which I don't know if I typically cover in quite detail, and there is something called story acceptance metrics, and what else? I usually typically talk about only 5 metrics because that's what I feel where it gives the maximum without impacting the individual behavior. It gives focus on helping on the project, focus only on the project. Okay, and I see sprint burn down using it in a different ways. Okay, it's not a status chart at all. There are different techniques of how you could use it in a much better context. Okay. So use it in a right way makes a lot of difference. And getting a sprint burn down is just updating a remaining hours every day. It takes like 10 seconds to really, yeah.
See, if you are trying to
Mike, please.
If you are trying to determine people's bonuses and performance rewards based purely on metrics, aren't you falling into the same trap as those people who work only on fixed cost model? Don't you think you need to engage with people? I mean, even a manager sit down, you might not as a manager, as a top level manager, like it that people are arguing with their managers and they're questioning whether their managers have their best interests in mind. But don't you think that you need to still go through some kind of an induction phase with the person and the manager for them to mutually decide what a person is worth, and in case there are many employees who are not satisfied with the way their manager is rewarding you and they're coming to you, then that is feedback. Just like in Agile, they'll go through an induction phase, and if the costing is coming out too high, then maybe the customer is expecting too many features. I mean, just a thought. I mean, I'm just curious what your perspective on that is.
Rahul, where I need to understand a little bit more, are you talking about the project measurements or the people measurements?
Project measurements. There is nothing to do with the project measurements, and why I'm saying this is because, being Agile, we've gone over the other end of the road in some projects at least, and what's happening is that we don't have visibility or closure. Even 3-4 sprints down the line, it's become too Agile, it's become a little bit too Agile.
Yeah, exactly. That's the danger, right? There is an, if you see, there is an extreme of Agile too. Okay. In some innovation games which I play, where I show the challenges of extreme Agile. What happens when you enter to the extreme part of it? It's a balance. You need to strike that balance, right? In your case, if it's a more of a client engagement kind of a challenge, is it like client is not having clarity with respect to what comes in next 4 sprints?
No, I think we're not measuring. We're not saying that, okay, with the
How much is
backlog, this is when we are likely to end the project. There are just no measurements in place at the moment.
But then things like burn down chart.
Tool.
No.
I mean, what tool? It's a tool problem. You think we are on Pivotal now?
No, not at all. Tool. The thing about tool is like a tool mindset. Okay. What happens is many times you understand the concepts very well, but then you purchase a tool. What you do is then you start thinking, you know what, this the tool supports it. Tool supports this tool. You go away from the concept of what you want to implement. You look through what is called like tool eyes. Through the tool, you'll see what can be implemented. Even I've added some scope changes, kind of coding also into it, so that you could. But yeah. In a sense, it's nothing to do with the tool. You could use it in very simple Excel. But if you have a kind of little bit distributed teams, you need a little bit more profound tools in that case, right? Probably a better tool. A Pivotal Tracker is a good tool. You could use that Pivotal Tracker, and if you use it in a right manner, it provides right information. You need to input some things, but to get the metrics out, you need to input a little bit of small things. But you could do it. There are innovative ways of doing the things. Okay. I have done, when I was working with ZB also, I had a team which I was supposed to consult. It was like 2-year-old product development team. They were just not ready to use anything. They are like random cowboy coding team. Completely cowboy coding. Okay. But it took me around 4 or 5 months to really transition them, their mindset, their thinking, everything. Okay, how to use. Just there are simple ways of making the things happen. I think the simplest chart I would say is the burn-down chart. I think that's a minimalistic you should have to really take it forward from there. And we could talk how to really on that front.
Another thing you mentioned is team comparison is a bad idea.
Yeah.
While I understand the philosophy of it, I've actually tried to check with Acquia if they have some standard. So what is also happening at Vision is that projects are measured. So which means sprint stories are measured in different ways by different teams, which is fine. But there is no speed or velocity of a company from a individual or a team perspective. You don't know how much time a team would take, and so maybe it's the wrong road to walk on. But I had asked Acquia if they knew what is an output expectation within their teams, and there are many teams in Acquia. So Jacob had mentioned that they have developed standards on what is the output expected of a person in the product engineering team. So it's a very small team, but they know that based on how they estimate their stories, each person is expected to complete, say for example, 50 stories. Jacob's not here. This is a old conversation I had with him.
Okay.
So is that a good thing to go for in a company where you have standardized ways of looking at stories?
See, definitely I need to understand exactly how they have defined it, but this, don't take me wrong with respect, okay? You could reach to a level where you don't need to do estimates also. Okay, don't hold me this one, but it's not you could do it in the day one. Okay, lot of teams where they have practiced for a longer time, they go to a model of they are able to split a feature into a similar size. So they track this sprint we did 7 stories. This is we can do 7 stories per sprint. They don't track it in terms of story points or whatever kind of things. Okay, then you could if you want, you could try to compare. But the challenge with comparison is, are they working on similar kind of products? Do they have the same product complexity? Do they have the same skill set? Then how can you compare it? The point, the challenge with, see, this is the point is that we were trying to do all this time, okay, all these so many years of software we were trying to do, but we actually misplaced on a basic concept, like we are working on 2 different, product complexity is different, people are different, the way that people are working, the team dynamics is different, all these things impacts the overall team performance. It's not about this team is doing bad. The same thing, I did the root cause analysis. You need to find what is that. You may have some kind of an inclination. You know what? Say the team A is just unable to. I think it got discharged. Okay. Team A is unable to really deliver continuously over the sprint. They are failing sprint after sprint. Okay. So in that means, then you need to really understand, but the team B is able to commit and deliver everything. You see that level of comparison, not at a very minute. Then you could work on a root cause of this particular team to understand what is that problem. It would be a client engagement issue, it could be a team issue, or some within the team there's two people who are the challenges to the team. So we need to figure out from that angle. So in a sense, definitely comparison is, that's where I differ a lot.
Avinash, the way I understand it is that if a team is together for a long period of time, then they would be able to come to a kind of a common story point definition.
You want to define that part?
No, what I'm saying is that one of the reasons why we may not be able to compare teams is because their definition of what a story point is could itself be different.
Yeah, agree.
And if you have people moving around in teams,
Yeah.
then it becomes very complex.
Yeah.
So, but if you have a team which is kind of worked together for a long period of time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then they will work out, and they will work out a definition of a story point,
Yeah.
which will be kind of consistent in every sprint,
Yeah.
right? And if there are two teams which are kind of working, and they both work for a different period of time, then you might be able to realize that what is the difference in their story point. So if the basic building point itself is different, then comparing the teams would be very, very difficult until and unless what the difference is.
Yeah, I agree. In a sense, you could definitely, there is no harm in trying this model. Okay. The reason why I'm saying is, we tried to do something similar exercise in when I was with my previous company, ZBR, where I tried to create a standard definition of a story point across the organization. Okay, standard definition. Try to then see if this team does the relative sizing and this team does the relative sizing, this is trying to compare. But I still felt the relative sizing itself is a human factor. Okay, you would run into a challenge once again, but you could still try to draw some kind of parallels, because in one of the conversations in recently on one of the groups was people want to convert story points into mandates. Okay, I said you could do it, but you should be careful about the impact of doing these kind of things. But there's a way of how to achieve it also. But if you just right away, you know what, this team multiply by some number into number of days, so that's a danger. So don't try to compare when you're starting on a new journey. Don't try to multiply some numbers and do that. Okay, so you could still do it by using a common definition. Try it out. The idea is, I mean, the biggest thing is try it out. If it starts impacting your team in some way, then I think it's time to stop.
Yeah,
there's no harm in trying it out.
Yeah, but the story points are only a reflection of complexity, not the volume of work. Right?
No,
So
actually,
it may also happen that two set of teams, even if they're given a same problem, and they both ascribe same story points to it, they might still take different times to solve it, not because of their efficiency level, but just because if one of the teams has worked on that problem before, right, then they would be able to...
So you are trying to, the question that you answer, you're solving your own question, right? So what I did with this company was I drove a probabilistic distribution curve, like one story point takes between this to this range, 2 point story takes between this to this range. There could be an overlap between the distribution curves. Okay, so you can't define an absolute number, but you can define a range. I
And
could
also-
share some information on that.
And
yeah.
also what I would also think is that in a company anyway, when you have lots of cross-pollinated teams, so let's say one team has worked on one project and then people from that team, people from another team start working together, they'll start developing a common understanding of estimation. Because they might have worked, like we have at Srijan, we have two different projects happening, Shashank's project, for example. They use numbers on a completely different format than, let's say, we do in another project. And our average velocity is, let's say, 20. Their average velocity is 100. Doesn't mean that they're doing more work. It's the same work. But the understanding of estimations is different. But those people, when they work, let's say, with this team, which is doing about an average of 20 points per sprint, they'll start kind of, averaging it out. So I think that's cross-pollination eventually will come to build a standard. It's a level of maturation over a period. Like you said, after a while, even a mature team doesn't need to estimate. They already, they can break it down into just stories per sprint. That makes more sense.
Yeah, right, exactly.
In that sense, I guess, Rahul, to answer your question would be that, once you have an idea of these are the stories that are required per sprint, then we have a better idea to even talk to the client and say, hey, listen, we're talking about this kind of estimation. That's where your KPI comes in for that particular team.
Okay, I have one more question if no one else has. So, it's not working.
Try. Come up here. So this one is working. You want to use this? No, it's working here.
So, basically, we have a small team of, say, 20 developers, and at a given point of time, we may have 3 projects, and we keep shuffling developers from team A to team B once project A completes and then project B completes. So, there's no defined team for a developer. It definitely, adds a lot of complexity in terms of managing their, communication and mutual understanding, but that's the way we run.
Yeah.
So, where does Agile and probably the philosophy you're talking about fit in there?
How big are these projects? When you say project A, how long does it take?
Varies. So, some of the projects are big, so talking 3, 4, 5, 6 months. That team is intact, but then the smaller projects are perhaps, the change requests. So I've got, say, 3 weeks work on project X in Linux mode.
Yeah.
I need 3 people. So one guy from that team is available, another guy from that team is available, mix them together, create a team, get the job
just
done.
for like 2, 3 weeks or 4 weeks
Yeah,
kind of
3,
thing.
4 weeks, 5
Yeah.
weeks.
You may not be able to do justice with Scrum.
Another.
Okay, so what typically you would do, you could follow another approach called Kanban. Okay, we could still, for the sake of, you could still build an agile company. It's not that you need to follow a Scrum to build an agile company, right? You don't need to follow a Scrum. So you could still follow a method called Kanban, where you have such a kind of a fluidity, right? With respect to the timeline is not much, and 3 weeks is 3 to 4 weeks is a small time for a team to even understand each other and get the things ball rolling, understand the product or what they're building. Where will you have time to invest on think about Scrum and all these kind of things? Let's be thing, right? So you could still you don't need to follow Scrum, or if you think even Kanban is tough to follow or whatever, for whatever reasons, you could still follow Kanban. I don't see it as a challenge. But you could still build an agile company. When I say agile company, in terms of the actual mindset, the cultural part of it, team taking ownership, a lot of those things are there, which we could definitely build. And when you probably become a 60 people company or so, you may have longer projects, longer duration. You have got all the ingredients ready to really get into the Scrum mode. Even 30 a longer project, bigger project, you have all the ingredients ready. You could really quickly get onto the Scrum bandwagon.
I thought so.
Yeah. I had a question,
Yeah.
just talking about from other people. Can an agile company scale to a very large numbers of people? Can you have a 500 people company and still follow agile?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the teams, what is the largest team size have you seen in a Scrum environment?
I have worked with we were building a music service which is quite similar to iTunes for LimeWire, and there I had a team in India of around 4 Scrum teams of each around 8 to 9 people, and in US we had 12 Scrum teams. Okay, all working
same
on
project.
one product, building one product.
Right.
Okay, that was a music service that we were building, pretty similar to what iTunes kind of things stuff.
Right.
Okay, so it's all depends upon how do you organize yourself.
So
okay?
is it like a Scrum of a Scrum?
Yeah, exactly. The Scrum of Scrum, Scrum of Scrum of Scrums. There are like different ways that we used to organize. And interestingly, recently I talked in one of the mobile conference in Bangalore how to execute large projects agile way. How to really build large-scale organizations and large projects really in agile way. Very simple, and a 10,000 feet level answer is the secret lies in breaking that large piece into smaller puzzles, smaller ones. Okay, and then put across the right communication and all those stuff in place, all masalas, and then you.
What are, sorry, just one follow-up. Like you mentioned, in a 2-3 week project, it's really not worthwhile to do Scrum, for example. Which are the type of projects that are just not suited for even Agile? Forget just Scrum. I mean, does anything come to your mind? Do you think anything can be done in Agile?
Yeah, anything can be done in Agile. It's not
Because I heard a different kind of a thing at Munich. There was this person over there who was talking about Agile and different development methodology. He's telling Agile is not suited for everything.
See, once again, when you get into that level analysis, right? Anything which is predictable, okay. There is some interesting curve. If you see, for example, manufacturing, and car plant, you know this is the car model that there is no innovation that you will do with every model that you are going to create, right? You will create 10,000s of that car. Okay, there is no innovation required. Then you don't need an agile there or a scrum process to be there. Although the scrum and agile thinking came from an automobile, okay, exactly, the lean philosophy, right? The lean philosophy. So the idea is there are two different principles, right? Adding value at every step and removing waste. But the concept of, if it is so predictable, your project, you know this car I need to build. There is no need of like showcasing, getting feedback, or giving freedom to the team to really innovate more on this, because this is all you want. Okay, it's highly predictable. There you don't need, you would just follow normal traditional method. Okay, but where rest of the projects where they fall is they require a lot of, because you don't have that level of clarity. It's an abstract. You need to put more details into it. Uncertainties, right? Most of the, I think, lot of so that's the reason in the manufacturing you don't need an agile or scrum kind of a thinking. Because it's very predictable. I need to build this cup. What is there? I'm not going to innovate. It gets into the manufacturing process. Every time it gets delivered, the same thing. I'm not adding something new every time, right? So you don't need agile and scrum. I'm just giving it from that angle. So if it's so predictable, don't go for it.
Once you have used agile to execute, you collect metrics from that, and when it comes to the appraisal point discussion, can't we just avoid the discussion altogether and use the metrics? So to me that did not sound like a very sort of, in theory it sounds good that the management is free to grow the business without needing to manage and deal with people sensitivities, but in practice I didn't find that or think that workable. What is your perspective on it?
See, ideally when you're going into performance management system, we talk about team in Agile, right? Then suddenly we start evaluating people on their individual contribution basis, okay? And this is once again it's not a kind of a solution, it's a gray area which you need to work for your company, what I'm going to just say. But organization, what they are doing is they are defining goals at a team level, okay? Team level, and trying to see how much that they were able to get the customer satisfaction, some kind of metrics more from the customer. So everybody is evaluated at that level. With the clause that if the team, there is one person out of 7 or 8 people who is not doing well at all, the team is not sitting quiet on it. They bring up those issues often in the retrospectives or in the meetings to bring it up as a challenge, and you act on it. That part, okay. There a lot of things should be working, but what the organization or rather should be moving towards is more towards the team-based goals. Okay, and a lot of other good organization in US where I've seen is they have dropped the concept of individual. They are just keeping like individual development goals of 25%, and 75% is like a team goal. As this team, what did they achieve together? So a lot of performance-related aspects. But it's a journey. You have to tweak around. You will play with your people. You don't want to play too much with your people mindset. They may leave. And India is a hierarchical structure country. So people want promotions and gets into lead, senior lead kind of thinking, which may go a little bit after some time, but gradually it's going, right? Nowadays, for example, when I was working in one of the companies, he's my colleague. He's like 15 years. He's a developer. Awesome developer. Okay, because he just loves what he's doing. He doesn't want to become a project manager or whatever. He wants to remain. After, I'm pretty sure 5 years down the line, these are the folks who would be the highest earners. You know, clients would love to have them on their team. Yeah, you know what? He's a 20-year-old, last 20 years he's developing on, that's in Java. Clients will be ready to pay any money to get him on board. Okay, because those are the specialists which we are missing currently as I see the things. It's also same with product management and a lot of other aspects. But very soon, how much project managers you would need if you start building a good self-organized teams? right? So performance management is a gray area, but still I would say, map it out how we can measure the team performance rather than at the individual level. Because as soon as you measure at the individual level, then it starts breaking the philosophy, the agile philosophy overall, and you start rewarding at that level all those challenges you run into. Okay?
Just one question. I know you really haven't touched on methodologies like Scrum specifically, but I just had a question for our own benefit. Is there any way to, what is your suggestions in terms of reducing the time that is spent on ceremony in Scrum? You know, I mean, retrospectives can go on for 3 hours if you have 10, you know, those kind of things.
Yeah, in a sense, see, there is...
The ceremony is required of Scrum, it's kind of part of it.
Yes.
But is there a way to kind of reduce that?
Of course.
What is a
For
minimum?
example, a 2-week sprint.
Okay, that's a 10-day thing, yeah.
Yeah, 2-week sprint, let's say an example.
That's an average.
Right? Daily Scrum, 15 minutes, no doubt. Okay? I'll give an example, or we could take it offline too. 15 minutes, and for example, sprint planning. What I have facilitated personally, it has not taken more than 2 to 4 hours of sprint planning. I keep a target of 2 hours. I say, team, if they completed it took 4 hours to do a 2-week sprint, then I say, can we reduce it to a bit lesser? So you work out how I could reduce that time spent on it. Retrospective should not take like 45 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 2-week sprint.
We're spending way too much time. But I read.
But you know what? You can't make a transition from 3 hours to, if it's taking 45 minutes, we need to understand why it is taking that 3 minutes. Once again, thinking, same thing. Why it is taking, what are kind of discussions we could have avoided in this retrospective. Okay. Or our retrospective have become a problem solving. All problems end up in retrospectives. We got 2 weeks, we didn't discuss any problem, and all the problem come up in retrospectives. Okay, that's called an anti-pattern. Retrospective anti-pattern. So we need to identify that the overall how the things are working, but it should not take at all like 4 hours is a good sprint planning meeting time, and 4 hours is what I am talking about. The people are able to commit everything when they started, what I am going to do in this sprint, and they start their day in this kind of implementation.
And if your daily stand-ups or the daily scrums are taking 45 minutes, there's a problem there.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a big problem, really. We need to really understand why it is taking 45 minutes. Are people focused on the 3 questions, whatever, okay? And are they coming prepared well enough to that one? And people ability to remain crisp is also a challenge, right? Because we you know what, yesterday I came, I got stuck in the traffic, or I started working on it, then suddenly I got that call. You get into a lot of all this Ramayana rather than focus on whether you're done or not done stuff. Okay, that's once again being crisp is a challenge for people.
Right.
So you need to
I think if
take
it
coach
starts
and
becoming a problem-solving session, then it becomes a problem.
yeah, exactly. Nothing is it's not a problem solving once again. The problem with here is we treat all this meeting as a problem solving. Then it becomes laborious, long discussions, and if there are 1 or 2 dismissal remarks that happens, then people will take it on ego, and then it will start moving around. Okay, so it's a very important how you handle
Keep
that
the
part.
daily scrums very, very clinical.
Clinical,
Three
15
answers,
minutes.
bang, bang, bang.
Yeah,
That's
clinical. Okay, but there are way how you could facilitate the daily Scrum meetings with keeping all the off-topic discussions, and post daily Scrum they could have a small quick discussion on off-topics once.
Right.
But if it's taking too long, it's time to introspect, like why it is.
Yep.
Otherwise, Scrum ceremony doesn't take much at all. It's done with a purpose why 15 minutes is kept, right? The idea is to achieve that goal of 15 minutes. Retrospectives are very important. There are a lot of teams who have been consistent doing retrospective have shown a big improvement in their productivity. The team productivity, huge. Scrum teams achieve a productivity of around 570% after doing Scrum from their first sprint to when they reach into like 25, 30th sprint. Okay, huge jump. It's a huge jump which I've seen in the Scrum in different parts of the world, and it's amazing really. That's the reason why.
I can testify to that. I've seen that, you know.
Yeah.
Massive improvement.
Massive improvement. And when you get to that level, then you may start doing what you call as hyper productivity metrics. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about those kind of things. It's called hyper productivity metrics, where you talk at a different level completely. Once again, it's like in yoga, right? You can't do the stages of your, so that's how it is. So you could, so it's very important what stage you are and measure right thing at that stage. It's not that, you know what, that Agile book says these metrics, let's follow this. No. What stage you are currently. The books can't define that all those stages very well, right? It's only by experience you will see, and then you redefine that part.
And whatever works for you.
Yeah, exactly. What works for you? Some people say, you know what, for me, I'm a small company, for me, waterfall works well. I said, then don't change. If it's working well, why, for what purpose? By changing it, you are only going to make it worse. Okay, so but if there's a real value, there's a real reason why you should go for Agile Scrum. There's a lot of reasons why you should go. It's all very in-depth. It's not a methodology at all. That's the reason. Okay. Yeah, thanks guys. It was great talking to all of you, and hoping to meet you at different. You could add me on LinkedIn. You could be on whatever group. You could post me any kind of question anytime. Okay, so I'll be there.
Delhi, we have our meetups. You wanna?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one more thing. We other than what I talked about these public workshops, we are conducting one in Srijan. If you got your some colleagues who wants to, or any of the company, really with the level of their involvement, they're really not seeing as, they're taking it to a different level. Okay, that's level of seriousness I see. So that's one of the main reasons why I and Srijan, we are coming together on this. Second, if you got your some company or anything in Hyderabad or whatever, I'm conducting in Jan later part in Jubilee Hills. Also, it's also fixed the venue and all these things. Other than that, we have started what is called a meetup, Agile meetup. Okay, you go to meetup.com, you will find you could find a group. If you all take my card or business card, whatever, or Srijan or anything, we could add into that meetup. That's a free meetup. Okay, it's just we're going to come together and talk and discuss and try to see if we could solve a problem.
The group is called Our Agile Journey.
Yeah, Our Agile Journey is the group. You could add yourself, and whenever is the next meetup is coming along, you will come to know that soon. You all can huddle together. Even your office can host the next meetup. So the offices that you're coming in could host your next meetup. We all will come there. We'll sit together and just a kind of a good knowledge exchange kind of time for all of us. Okay. So, and keep in mind, every problem is unique. So you need to really see it from the context before you solving it. Don't see that, you know what, that organization has solved in this way, those kinds. Okay. You can probably put across a trend, but not an exact solution. Okay. So thanks, guys. It was great talking to you. Yeah. Thank you.